So before we get into the preview of this weekend's action, where we're once again going to have 12 games, and unfortunately there's one game that got postponed, which I of course will get to, I want to quickly make a quick announcement that there is a big possibility that I could come back ground hopping, and that the Sports Hop series, after it's been hiatus for over 7 months, could make its comeback this week, and that I'm actually planning to go to the preseason friendly match between Richmond SOL versus Elk Grove Blues. The only issue that I have is that they didn't tell me exactly where the game is taking place, and I've already tried to reply them both on Facebook and Twitter to see where the game is going to take place. I even DM Elk Grove Blues, who's one of the team that's going to be involved in the preseason friendly, to tell me where exactly the game is going to take place, and so far I have not got a response from either of those teams. So I'm hoping they eventually will respond to me, and that if you're actually watching this and you work for either Elk Grove Blues or Richmond SOL team, let me know in the comments below where exactly the game is taking place, because I really want to go to that game, and that's really the only game I have checked to see where there actually is a preseason friendly game that's going to be taking place this weekend. Since we only have 3 games that is going to be taking place on Saturday, I'm not going to miss too much action from this weekend's MLS midweek action. Now, speaking of which, since we only had 3 games on Saturday, there was actually originally going to be 4 games that's going to be taking place, but the Colorado Rapids versus LA Galaxy match just a couple of minutes ago was announced that it is postponed to another day, and I feel like it's getting to a point where, this is the 3rd match in a row that the Rapids have been postponed because either their staff member or one of their players got COVID-19 test positive, and that they're kind of running out of date in terms of trying to make up for these games, and that it's getting to a point where MLS is going to eventually have to make a decision whether are they going to now ask the Rapids to either play for those games, or the fact that they're going to have to either forfeit some of those games, or they're just kind of forfeit the entire season. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the team in the Western Conference, especially if you're a team that is on the bubble right now of either making the playoffs or not this season, I'm pretty sure a lot of them are rooting for the Rapids to probably forfeit some of the game, or even forfeit the entire season, because now that means that only 3 teams will not make the playoffs in the Western Conference, compared to this year that 4 teams is not going to get out of the playoffs in the Western Conference. But either way, after that little mini spiel, let's get into the first game on Saturday, which is between Inter Miami versus Houston. And, as I said, I never like to see games that is postponed, but a blessing in disguise the fact that since I have 12 games to talk about, I don't have to switch the board twice. But also, that game between the Rapids and the Galaxy was supposed to be on Twitter. And, originally I was going to say, how last week the MLS gods basically bless us with no Twitter stream whatsoever? Well, this week they demand payments in terms of the fact that we didn't get to see a Twitter stream, and that there's going to be 2 Twitter streams that we are going to unfortunately have to endure. But fortunately, the fact that that game got postponed, this is the only game that unfortunately we have to endure listening to the very annoying Twitter commentator in this one. Now, coming into this game for both of these teams, Miami currently have a 4-2-10 record, and Houston have a 4-7-5 record. This game kicks off at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Miami, of course, won 2-1 against the Red Bulls away, while Houston won 2-0 against Dallas at home. Top goal scorer for both of these teams. For Miami, you got Lewis Morgan as the top goal scorer with 4 goals. Pizarro followed him with 3 goals, although he is not going to be available in this game because he's with the Mexican national team. Then you got Agudelo also with 3 goals, followed by Carranza with 2 goals. And Breck actually made it onto this list with 2 goals. And it's 2020 when Breck makes it to the list of the top goal scorer of his team. Now, for Houston, you got Quintero currently tops the list with 6 goals, followed by Albert Feliz, who's no longer with this team, with 4 goals. Then you got Memo Rodriguez scoring 3 this season, before you had Christian Ramirez and Ariel Lassiter tied with 2 goals as the top goal scored for the Houston Dynamo. Now, obviously this is a game where both of these teams feels like there's some life that they might have found after getting a big victory in the last game. Obviously Miami, we're probably still talking about that Higuain free kick goal of him scoring his first MLS goal in style, but now it's going to be interesting to see, can he of course continue to follow up, and can Miami start to get a little bit of a winning streak going so that they can of course get themselves above the red line. Remember, if you're in the Eastern Conference, you're technically not always going to be out of it, and that Miami, I believe they're only 2 points out of the last spot of the playoffs, so if they can get a winning streak going, they could really get themselves back above the red line. While for the Dynamo, I talked about how the Eastern Conference you're never out of. In the West, it's kind of something similar to that, unless if you're Vancouver or maybe the LA Galaxy. But for those bubble team that is between 8th, 9th, 10th place, they're kind of really bunch up together, and that the Dynamo is only 1 point behind, I believe, I forgot who was the eighth place team. I know the Quakes is currently in 7th place, but I think maybe the Rapids is currently 8th place because they haven't played a lot of games lately, and that obviously the Rapids have 3 games in hand, so most likely they're not going to stuck in 8th place unless they lose all of those games. But yeah, there is definitely a fight for those last couple of spots in the playoffs, and after getting that 2-0 win against Dallas to kind of end that losing streak that they're in, there's definitely hope that both of these teams, or there's definitely hope for Houston, and certainly hope for both of these teams now that they are back on the winning track. But for this game, also I didn't put the prediction score or the prediction box for any of these games because I didn't have enough room to put into. But I'm gonna say it's gonna be a draw between both of these teams. I mean, Houston is a team that don't do very well on the road, and for Miami, yes, they got a 2-1 win against the Red Bulls, but the question is, can they follow that up? And we've seen times this season where it looked like things have, of course, turned around, and then the very next game, they gone back to being a team that lost 5 in a row to start this season. So, yeah, I'm going to say it's going to be a draw between both of these teams. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Atlanta and the Red Bulls. And remember how this used to always be a matchup that a lot of people would be looking forward to, and this matchup used to be the battle between the top 2 team, or at least some of the best team in the Eastern Conference. Well, how times have changed right now, because the Red Bulls, they're coming off of a 2-1 loss against Miami at home, and they have a record of 6-2-8. While Atlanta, they did drew 0-0 against Orlando at home, and their record improved to 5-3-8. This game kicks off at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. For Atlanta, their top goal scorer, there hasn't been really a lot of goals scored for Atlanta or for the Red Bulls in this case. But you got Gallagher currently tops the list with 3 goals, and then there's a bunch of guys that currently have 2 goals for Atlanta. You got Ezekiel Barco, Emerson Hyman, Adam John, and Brooks Lennon, all tied with 2 goals apiece in the top goal scorer chart. For the Red Bulls, it's kind of a similar story where you got Daniel Royer currently tops the team with 4 goals, but then you got a bunch of guys that currently has 2 goals, the likes of Kaku, who's not going to be available in this game because of international duty, with 2 goals. Then you got Kyle Duncan, Florian Vela, and Omar Fernandez, all tied with 2 goals apiece for the Red Bulls. And that, coming into this game, I'm going to say, I'm also kind of interesting to see how the Red Bulls, now that they're under Gerhard Stuber, and I believe this is going to be his first game, because I think in the last game it was still Bradley Carnell that was taking charge of this team, but since they announced Gerhard Stuber was going to be their new head coach a couple of days ago, I'm assuming this is going to be the game that he's going to be taking charge for the first time. And what a way to take charge your first Red Bulls game when you're facing against one of probably the bigger rival for the Red Bulls in Atlanta United. And again, I know this game isn't what used to be with both teams. Seems to kind of have really took a fall from grace this season, but it's still a very important match, and I definitely still see the rivalry factor between both of these teams. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Red Bulls will respond, and whether is this going to be the case where the Red Bulls are going to get that new manager injection, where it always happens whenever a new manager take control their first or second game, and that the team seems to play harder with the way that they want to impress their new head coach. Whereas for Atlanta, you know, in the last couple of games, they have definitely shown life that they can potentially get themselves into playoff contention, and that we'll see whether or not if they can continue coming into this game. But either way, I'm gonna say this is gonna be another draw between both of these teams, but I'm leaning toward Atlanta as the one that is going to be the favorites coming into this one. But moving on, in terms of the next match, it is the Desperation Derby between Vancouver versus RSL. And the reason why I say this is the Desperation Derby is that you got a Whitecaps team that is currently 11 in the Western Conference with a 5-0-11 record, while RSL currently have a 4-6-6 record. This game kicks off at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and that this is also the last game that's going to be taking place on Saturday. Vancouver, of course, won 2-1 against RSL in the last meeting between both of these teams, but that was the last time the Whitecaps have actually won a game, as I think they have now gone on a 4-game winless run, and I think they lost all 4 games during that stretch. Well, for RSL, they of course are coming off with 3-0 loss against LAFC, and they also have been struggling in the past couple of games. I think they only won 1 game out of their last 5 games so far, and find themselves sitting in 10th place in the Western Conference. Top goal scorer for both of these teams. For Vancouver, Freddie Montero and Dahome currently ties with the top goal scored with 3 goals apiece. Then you got Jake Nowinski with 2 goals and Lucas Cavallini with 2 goals. And yeah, again, this is 2020 with the way that somehow in some way Jake Nowinski would be finding himself in the top goal scorer chart, even though he's not a guy that you would think that score a bunch of goals to somehow in some way end up in the top goal scorer chart. And then at number 5 you got Athlete Latnan with 1 goal apiece, but there's a bunch of Vancouver Whitecaps players have also registered 1 goal this season. Now for RSL, you got the Karate Kid, Demar Krylak currently top the goal scorer chart of the team with 6 goals. Then followed up by Albert Rusnak and Justin Miram with 3 goals, Corey Bear with 2 goals, and Michael Chan currently have 1 goal for RSL. But as I said, this is the Desperation Derby for both of these teams. Both of them are desperate in terms of trying to get all 3 points, and that I think a win will definitely give them a little belief that they can, of course, get themselves back into playoff contention. And that, I know, even though I said this is kind of like a Desperation Derby, if there is one team out of this Desperation Derby that really needs a win, it has to be the Vancouver Whitecaps. I mean, these last couple of games, just as you thought that there was some hope that they got coming out of phase 1 where they only had to play Canadian team, and coming into phase 2 of the schedule, yeah, they have not won a single game ever since the schedule was kind of announced. The rest of the regular season was announced. So yeah, they're definitely hungry to try to get a win against an RSL team that, again, is a team that is really struggling in the last couple of games, both on the defensive end and also on the attacking end, which therefore I expect this could be a low scoring game between both of these teams with the way that both of them struggle to score. But I am not going to say that this game is going to what that is going to happen, because as soon as I say that, most likely this is going to be a high scoring game, or one of these teams are probably going to score a goal literally 4 minutes into the game. And all I said about the fact that this is going to end scoreless is going to just it end up not being true at the end of the day. But moving on into the next match is going to be the first game of what will be a 9-game action on Sunday. And the first one will be the afternoon game between NYCFC versus New England, which kicks off at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. This game will be featuring NYCFC, who has an 8-2-6 record, and New England have a 5-7-4 record. Now for NYCFC, they have got points 9 out of 10 games, and in other words, they've only lost once in their last 10 games, and they're definitely feeling like they got back their good form, and feeling like the team that that finished first place in the Eastern Conference. Whereas for New England, they lost 1-0 against Toronto at home. But the good news is, this is a road game for New England. And it seemed like this season, for whatever reason, New England tends to do better on the road than they do at home, which just does not make it any sense whatsoever, because you would think it's the other way around, that teams usually do well this season. Now, in terms of the top goal scorer for NYCFC, you got Anton Tinnerholm and Mitrita currently tied with 4 goals. And remember how there was those rumors surrounding that Mitrita could be going to Saudi Arabia and joining a team there on loan? Well, that rumor is now officially true, as Mitrita is going to be going to Saudi Arabia and be with that club for until 2022 on loan. And I know NYCFC fans are kind of shocked the way that they saw this happen, but when I heard the reason why he decided to go to Saudi Arabia is mainly because he wanted to be closer to home, to his family in Romania, and that I don't blame the fact that he decided to make the move if that is the case, because it's always hard for all these kind of players that is not from the US or Canada, or all these European players that is coming into a new country that they are not familiar with, and they don't really have a lot of people that they can of course be friends with, and that they feel like a little bit homesick and rather return to Europe. So yeah, it's understandable why he decided to do that, even though I know NYCFC fans are kind of frustrated, because this was the guy that, at least for the last couple of games, he looked like he was going to be the heir of Maxime Morales, and now he's no longer there. There's going to be question once again where exactly the creative department will come from this NYCFC team. Now, you got Alexander Ring and Tajiri Shradi with 3 goals apiece, followed by Jesus Medina with 2 goals. For New England, you got Gustavo Bol currently at the top of the chart with 5 goals. Then you got Theo Bunbury with 4 goals, Adam Buxall with 3, Tejan Buchanan and Kester currently tied with 1 goal apiece. And that, New England, or not New England, but NYCFC is going to be the one that I think is going to be favorites in this. And despite the fact that New England, again, somehow they do better on the road than they do at home, one thing that they need to fix is clearly their finishing. I mean, the last game was a clear example of that, where once again they had a lot of chances to potentially score a goal, and even had a penalty in that game to potentially score a goal and at least get a point out of that game against Toronto. But because of the lack of finishing that they had, that is the reason why they didn't get any single point at home, and their home woes, of course, continue. But maybe they'll fix this since they're back in their familiarity, which is going on the road this season. But they're going to have to face an NYCFC team that, time will tell. I know in the last game they scored 4 goals with Mitrita, but that was against DC United, and that was a DC United team that was basically a sinking ship. Time will tell whether or not if NYCFC can actually continue to do very well, even though they don't actually have a real number 10 that is going to be pulling the string for them, for this team. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the game of the week between LAFC versus the Seattle Sounders. Although I think, if this was maybe earlier the year, or maybe if this was last season, you could definitely say that this is the game of the week, because these are supposed to be 2 of the best team, and 2 teams that a lot of people are saying they are the best team in MLS. However, obviously, while the Seattle Sounders have continued that excellent form and that they're top in the Western Conference, LAFC is kind of struggling this season and being very inconsistent. And that coming into this game for LAFC, they have a 6-3-6 record, while Seattle has a 9-3-3 record. LAFC did win 3-1 against RSL and did bounce back after that embarrassing loss that they took prior to the RSL game, where they lost 2-1 at home to the Quakes. While Seattle, they have won 5 out of their last 6 games, and as I said before, if you not include the fact that they played the Portland Timbers in the Cascadia Derby, they technically have not lost anybody besides the Portland Timbers. Now, the top goal scorer for both of these teams, for LAFC, you got Diego Rossi, who I believe he leads the league right now with 12 goals, although he's not going to be available in this game because he's currently with Uruguay on international duty, which means that goal scoring duty unfortunately will have to fall to Bradley Wright Phillips, who surprisingly he is still scoring a bunch of goals. And I wonder, the Red Bulls probably have made a big mistake in terms of trying to decided to kind of let him walk and join LAFC, because he once again have shown that goal scoring form that he had a couple of years ago, with now 8 goals to his name. Then you got Marc-Anthony Kaye with 3 goals apiece, followed by Brian Rodriguez, another player that is joining Uruguay on international duty and unavailable for LAFC in this game, with 2 goals, followed by Maswatsky with 2 goals apiece. And as a Quakes fan, I'm definitely not salty whatsoever letting Danny Maswatsky walk to LAFC, even though he was a hot prospect for for the San Jose Earthquakes when he was with Reno 1868. Yeah, I'm not salty whatsoever about that. The Sounders, in terms of their top goal scorer chart, you got Ruidíaz currently tops the list with 9 goals, but he is another player that is going to be on international duty, this time with Peru. While you got Jordan Morris, who pretty much is going to be the guy that is going to have to take the goal scoring kind of toll with 8 goals so far this season, followed by Ladero with 4 goals. Then you got Leardam with 3 and João Paulo currently with 2 goals apiece. Now, there's no doubt that I think Seattle is going to be favorites coming into this game, because LAFC is going to be very depleted going forward on the attack, and they also are missing a couple of guys in the midfield and defensive end because of international duty. And knowing the fact that LAFC this season, they've been so inconsistent in that in the last game, yes, they won 3-1 against RSL, but it seemed like whenever they have these kind of good performances that they had in that game against RSL, they just haven't been able to replicate in the very next game. And judging by the fact that the Seattle Sounders, even without Ruidíaz, I think this team is going to be really decent, and that they should be able to get the 3 points against an LAFC team that, again, it's a very depleted team, and it's a team that has just been shown that inconsistency throughout the season, and hence that's why they are stuck kind of in the middle part of the Western Conference, albeit they are still technically in the playoff position. But judging if this is going to be the LAFC team that's going to go to the playoffs, it's hard to really imagine they are going to be a team that is going to actually contend to win MLS Cup if they just don't stop this inconsistent form that they had going through this season. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Chicago versus DC United. And by the way, this is actually the last game on this board before I switch it up. But in this game, the Chicago Fire come into this one with a 4-4-8 record, while DC United has a 2-5-9 record. This game kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Chicago, of course, lost 1-0 to SKC away, while DC United lost 4-1 to NYCFC away, and that ultimately led to Ben Olsen to pretty much call it a quit, and now he's no longer the head coach for DC United. Top goal scored for both of these teams. For Chicago, you got Beric, who he had a chance in last week or not last week, but in the last game against SKC to extend his goal scoring tally to 6 games in a row with at least a goal, but fortunately he wasn't able to put away the penalty, and that kind of end his streak in terms of scoring a goal in 5 straight games. But still, he is red hot right now and currently tops the team with 7 goals, followed by Fabian Herberts with 4 goals. Then you got Madron Pineda, both with 2 goals, with Mihailovic currently with 1 goal to finish off the top goal scoring chart for the Chicago Fire. For DC United, Ola Kamara currently have 3 goals, followed by Higuain and Brion with 2 goals apiece, and then there's a couple of players that currently have 1 goal. Some of those players are Julian Gresso and Russell Canals for this team. Now, obviously, I am very interested to see how DC will play in this one, knowing that this is the first game of an official new era for DC United, and that Ben Olsen that's been running for 10 years now, well, it is now finally over with him of course, decide to step down as head coach. And this will be interesting to see whether or not if some of these DC players that you can clearly see that they weren't playing for Ben Olsen in the last couple of games, can they actually start to have that new injective energy now that they have a new interim head coach there and can perform well. Although that being said, they are playing against a Chicago team that they look to try to get themselves back on track and look to trying to keep track of contention of the Eastern Conference playoff race. I believe right now they're just outside of that playoff race with a 2-point gap between them and Nashville SC in 10th place. So this is a big opportunity for them to face against a very, very weak, but at the same time, could easily underestimated kind of DC United team and have a chance to get a win at home in this. And, if I had to make a prediction for this, I'm going to say Chicago will win this. Even if DC are going to get that injective energy with a new head coach coming into this team, I just feel like Chicago this season, knowing how they've been kind of inconsistent, and since they lost the last game, you probably know that they're probably going to win this one. And especially if there's one thing that's kind of been consistent for Chicago this season is that their home form has been spectacular, and that I think they should be able to get all 3 points against a struggling DC team in this game. But that being said, I am now going to switch the boards and look at the last 6 games that's going to be happening in this weekend's action around MLS. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is FC Cincinnati and TFC. So this game is going to kick off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. FC Cincinnati has a 3-4-9 record, while Toronto has a 10-4-2 record. TFC, of course, have won 4 in a row, while Cincinnati, well, despite the fact that they do struggle in terms of scoring goals, and especially struggle on the road, they somehow have drew 0-0 in 4 straight of their home games. And that for FC Cincinnati, in terms of the top goal scored, I'm actually even surprised the fact that I was able to fill out this chart because they have only scored 8 goals this season, and that their top goal scored is Yaya Kubo with 2 goals. But besides that, you have 6 players that certainly tied with 1 goal apiece, and those 6 players, well, at least 4 of those 6 players are Brendan Vasquez, Harris Medunian, Alan Cruz, and Frankie Maya, all tied with 1 goal apiece. Now for TFC, you got Ayola Quinola with 8 goals, Pozuelo with 7, Larea with 4, Piatti with 3, and Josie Altidore rounds up the list with 2 goal apiece. And I know this game is a very tempting game for me to say that this one has 0-0 written all over it, and damn it, I just said it, didn't I? I just said the thing that I was not going to say ever again, because I know something will tell me that this game is not going to end 0-0. But hey, maybe that will be the case, and I'm pretty sure for Cincinnati's sake, they're probably tired with the way that they're just seeing their team getting 0-0 resort, or them just getting absolutely obliterated time after time this season. So we shall see whether or not if they can maybe finally score a goal at home. Whereas for Toronto, it'll be interesting to see whether they decide to rest some guys. I mean, in the last game, they definitely did not look very, very well, which kind of makes me wonder, are Greg Vanney kind of tiring this team out by regularly putting almost the same starting 11, and that this is a game that is a perfect opportunity for them to rest some of the guys and not really have to necessarily worry about them falling behind and losing track in terms of the teams that's catching up to now them, that the one that is only the crown of the Eastern Conference. Now, speaking of which, moving on into the next match, and the reason why Toronto owns the crown is because Columbus, for a very long time, they were at the top of the Eastern Conference, but ever since they went winless in 3 games and that their record is now 9-4-3, they now find themselves in 3rd place of the Eastern Conference, and not far behind them is Orlando City, who has an 8-6-2 record, and they are unbeaten in 10 games and currently have the longest unbeaten streak in the league, and that they also are looking to try to extend their record of the longest unbeaten streak in club history with 10 games to their name. Now for Orlando City, their top goal scorer, you got Chris Mueller currently with 7 goals. Then you got Nani, DK, and Michel all with 4 goals apiece, before you got Junior Urso to follow up with 3 goals in the top goal scoring chart for Orlando City. For Columbus, Jersey Zardes currently is in first place with 10 goals, and I think he's the second highest goal scorer in the league right now, followed by Zalarian, who unfortunately will not be available in this game because of the hamstring injury. It's going to be out for these next couple of weeks with 5 goals apiece. Then you got Pedro Santos with 4 goals, Yunus Mokhtar with 3 goals, and Darlington Nagbe, who they've been missing for a very long time, and probably one of the bigger reasons why they have kind of struggled in these last couple of games, only have 1 goal to his name. And that, I talked about earlier that the Seattle versus LAFC game is the game of the week. Well, it might be the game of the week if you want to hear two very well-known name in MLS and 2 teams that you would think who is exactly the best team in MLS, and those 2 teams you come up in mind. This one I think is underrated to be a game that should potentially be the game of the week, because you have 2 very good teams facing off against each other. Orlando, they're looking to try to extend their unbeaten run, and also trying to extend their unbeaten run at home too, where I don't think this season they have actually lost at home this season. Well, Columbus, they have been really struggling on the road, and that they are still searching for their first win on the road, and that this is not a great place to try to search for your first road win if you're going to be facing against an Orlando City team that, as I mentioned, they are just red hot right now. But that being said, this is MLS, this is 2020, crazy things of course would happen. I mean, last week Columbus, they were part of the shock of them losing their first ever home game this season by losing 2-1 to Montreal. So maybe they can do the favor to Orlando City and cause them to suffer their first home loss of this season. But we shall see how this game is going to go, and it's a shame the fact that a lot of people probably won't be paying a whole lot of attention to this, because this game is not on national television, whereas the LAFC versus Seattle one is on national television on ESPN. But I recommend you guys to kind of watch this, and that I'm going to definitely keep a close eye in terms of this very entertaining game between both of these teams. Now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is SKC and Nashville. So, Sporting KC have an 8-2-5 record, while Nashville has a 4-6-5 record. This game kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. SKC had an ugly 1-0 win against Chicago away in the last one, while Nashville, they're unbeaten in 4 games, but they have only won 1 out of those 4 games, and they had a couple of 0-0 draw and a 1-1 draw in those 4-game unbeaten run. Now, for SKC, their top goal scorer is still Johnny Russell with 6 goals. Then you got Polito, who fortunately is out because of international duty. It has 5 goals to his names. Then you got Gadi Kinda and Kyrie Shelton with 4 goals before he got Hurtado rounds off the list with 2 goals for SKC this season. For Nashville, they're another team that is really struggling this season to score goals. So they've still only scored 11 goals so far, which is the second fewest ahead of FC Cincinnati. Rios currently tops that chart with 2 goals, but then you got, I think 10 players currently, well, 9 players on this team that have 1 goal, and 4 of those 9 players are Romney, Walker Zimmerman, Dax McCarty, and Randall Leao with 1 goal to its name. And something tells me this is going to be a low scoring game, and something also tells me that, SKC, they need to do it again. They need to play ugly in this game and kind of play a similar style that they did to just somehow find a goal to be able to beat a Nashville side that, despite the fact that they are on an unbeaten run right now, they have struggled in terms of this season on the road. So, yeah, this is going to be a game where I'm going to say SKC will win it and that they'll get an ugly win. But for Nashville, since they're on a 4-game unbeaten run, we'll see whether or not, if they can, of course, make it 5 in a row. Although there is still a question whether or not if Rios is going to be back in the starting 11 in this game. And then unfortunately, they're going to have to wait until, I think they might have cadets ready for this game from what I heard from last week. But we shall see whether or not if he's actually going to be playing in this game or coming off as a substitute. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Union against Montreal. So the Philadelphia Union has a 9-4-3 record, while Montreal has a 6-2-8 record. This game kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Philly, of course, have won every single game at home, and I think they're the only team that has been able to achieve that feat after Columbus last week lost that record of having a perfect record at home. And the team that Columbus lost that perfect record is the team that Philly is going to play this week as Montreal. They're looking to try to do it 2 games in a row, but by pretty much once again shocking the MLS world by knocking off the team with a perfect record at home. As in the last game, they were able to do it by winning 2-1 against Columbus away. Now for the Union, you got Shibilko currently with 7 goals to top the goal scoring chart, even though I know a couple of Union fans are kind of a little bit frustrated with how Kasper Shibilko has been playing this season. He's still in the top goal scoring chart for your team with 7 goals. And then it's followed by Aronson and Fontana with 4 goals apiece. Then you got Bedoya with 3 goals before Elzino, which I didn't put it here on the board, but he also has 3 goals to his name. Now, for Montreal, you got Kyoto currently have 6 goals apiece, and I believe Kyoto should be back with this team after he served a couple of games of suspension. Then you got Taider and Lapinainen and Urruti with 4 goals apiece before Bojan, who, again, I forgot to put the number of goals that he has scored so far this season, but he actually have scored 2 goals to his name, including the winning goal last week against Columbus. So, yeah, this is another game that I think the Union should be able to win this, but, Montreal are looking to trying to shock the MLS world again and trying to surprise me again by beating a team beating a team that's playing at home that have yet to lose or even draw a game at home. That could definitely be a case, but again, I feel like the Union should have enough to face a Montreal side that they're definitely trying to fight their way to get into the playoffs. Well, right now they're in the playoff position, but they're trying to fight their way to keep that position against teams that is also trying to be in hot pursuit in terms of getting their position. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Dallas against Minnesota. So Dallas currently have a 5-6-4 record, while Minnesota has a 6-5-5 record. This game kicks off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Dallas, of course, did lose 2-0 in the Texas Derby last Wednesday. Well, not last Wednesday, but on Wednesday this week to Houston away, while Minnesota is still searching for their first real win since the MLS season was suspended back in March, as they drew 0-0 in the last game against Nashville SC. Top goal scorer for Dallas, you got Franco Jara currently with 5 goals, followed by Mosquera with 4 goals. Then you got Rito Ziegler and Ricardo Pepi and Zdenek Odronczyk, who's no longer with this team, with 2 goals apiece. For Minnesota, Kevin Molino still tops the chart with 7 goals, followed by Robin Leu with 4 goals. Then you got Ethan Finley, Luis Amaria, and Iko Par to have two goal apiece to their name. And, coming into this game, I don't want to say that this is a game where Minnesota look like it's kind of a throwaway game for Adrian Heath again, because knowing the fact that they're playing Dallas, a team that Minnesota really struggle whenever they play against them on the road, you would think Adrian Heath would just pretty much put a reserve team in this and take his chances in the next game against Chicago at home. But that being said, I said that last week when we were playing against, well, not last week, but it was 2 weeks ago when we played against Columbus, and that was kind of a throwaway game, and that we take our chance against RSL to get the 3 points, and we didn't do that. And knowing the last game against Nashville, where, if this was truly a throwaway game for Minnesota, they clearly should have won in the last game against Nashville. Because if they won that last game against Nashville on the road, then I think this is clearly a throwaway game for Adrian Heath, because you want to rest his guys ready for the Chicago game at home, and that game seems like the one to have all 3 points. But this is kind of one of those ones where I kind of feel like we're not going to get anything out of this, but at the same time, we also want to at least get a point or even a win out of this game, because again, the Western Conference right now is really tight, and this Loons team, yes, they have gone on a bit of an unbeaten run, but the problem is they haven't got a lot of wins during those unbeaten runs, and they've drawn a lot of games during those times. And drawing games is fine when you do it on the road, but if you do it at home, that could be a little bit of an issue. So, yeah, I feel like Dallas is going to potentially win this one, but I really hope Minnesota will at least get a draw or even a win in this game after make up for a couple of the last games where those games looked like they were winnable games that Minnesota unfortunately dropped points against. But moving on, now into the last game of this weekend's action is the Portland Timbers against the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, I know on paper the Timbers are heavy favorites in this, and on paper, anytime when the Quakes play against the Timbers at Providence Park, I always say it's an automatic loss for the Quakes, because the Quakes, for the past 10 years when they play against the Timbers, well, maybe for the past 9 years against the Timbers, somehow in some way they have yet to ever won against the Portland Timbers at Providence Park. And this one, while the Quakes did win 3 in a row to improve their record to 5-5-6, Portland has been unbeaten in 5 games, and their record is now 8-3-4, and they're in hot pursuit of their Cascadia rival Seattle Sounders for that top spot in the Western Conference. And that 5-game unbeaten streak include in the last game where they absolutely destroyed the Galaxy by winning 6-3 on the road. And in terms of the top goal scored for the Timbers, you got Diego Valeri and Abogasi both tied with 7 goals, followed by Felipe Mora with 6 goals. Then you got Jimmy Chara and Niscoda with 3 goals apiece. For the Quakes, you got Wando, and somehow the lamppost Andy Rios it has 4 goals apiece, while you got Vaco, who's not going to be available in this game because of international duty, with 3 goals apiece, followed by Espinoza and Alanis with 2 goals to their name. And, again, as I said in the review, I'm still not sold on the fact that the Quakes, of course, winning 3 in a row means that this gives me hope that they are a playoff contender, because those 3 games, besides LAFC that we won on the road, which was a very lucky win, we've been playing 2 of the worst teams in the Western Conference. This will be a good measuring stick in terms of whether or not if they're playoff contention. And I know it's kind of a bit of a harsh measuring stick, consider they're playing a team that's red hot, and they're playing them on the road and at a place that is a house of horror for the Quakes. But, even if they lose this game, I hope they will at least look competitive, and unlike what happened in the last game when they got destroyed 6-1 against the Portland Timbers. And that if you're the Portland Timbers coming into this game, you're definitely feeling that you can, of course, win another one against the Quakes, since you've never lost to them at home. But you gotta also be careful not to be a little bit overconfident. And also, this could be a game where maybe Savarese might think about rotating his squad, because in the last game he pretty much played his strongest team against the Galaxy. And knowing the fact that when you have so many of these games coming thick and fast, this is kind of one of those games that maybe Savarese are going to be tempted to try to kind of rotate the team a little bit. And if that's the case, then I think the Quakes might have a chance in terms of this, because the last time when both of these teams were playing against each other and it was kind of a rotated squad that Savarese got against the Quakes were able to get a 1-1 draw. But either way, again, if I look at past history and knowing how the Timbers have been red hot lately, it would take a miracle for the Quakes to win. They need to do what they did against LAFC to trying to do it again. But hey, this is 2020, and again, MLS seems to be even more crazier than it ever been. So we'll never know. No, you never know that the Quakes might actually broke that curse of them not getting their first win at Providence Park. But if I want to be realistic, I'm going to say it's going to be a loss for the Quakes, and that the Portland Timbers should be able to win this game. But yeah, there we have it. That is pretty much it for all the games that I have previewed. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these 12 games? And as always, let me know in the comments below also in terms of your prediction for all 12 of these games. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I, of course, will see you guys next time.